this screencast as soon as you have completed watching the sections on the Eye on the Prize series. Some of the points that this screencast will address and reference: the Federalist debate. There will be no final closure on any of this issue, and the past has an influence on the present, which would set us up for the viewing of the film Do the Right Thing, looking at the difference between King and X. So we're going to begin here with lynching. When we think of the term lynching, I want you to think of mob justice. In this particular image, maybe the individuals that are losing their lives, have lost their lives, that these individuals, according to the mob, has done some sort of crime, and mob justice is going to find them guilty and dish out punishment. Ida B. Wells was a woman, one of the founders of the NAACP. She was a reporter, and she was working to try to get a lynching bill. This is an image of the lynching memorial. Take a look at this song, Strange Fruit, written in 1939, which is about lynching. Just another image of the lynching memorial. So here we see the Dyer Bill. The Dyer Bill was working, it was an attempt to try to have federal legislation to stop the practice of lynching in America. So this is a direct connection to the Federalist, anti-federalist debate. But the federal government is trying to make change with regard to mob justice. The question here is whether or not the Till case represents a lynching. I want you to think about this scenario here. If you were the parent of Emmett Till, or maybe you were a black parent, and your kid, 8-year-old, 10-year-old, wants to know what happened to Emmett, wants to know what does it mean to be black in America, should you be concerned about your life, what would you say as a parent? So pause the screencast and just think about that in your head. Let's move on now to Birmingham and the Rosa Parks situation. If we were in class, I would ask you to role play this particular scenario. Pick somebody to be the driver, and what would you say to Rosa Parks? I always find it interesting that a lot of these segregation laws rely on individuals to enforce. If you're the driver, you are the one that's expected to enforce the particular legislation, and that just seems to be a burden, possibly. Think about what's going on with the COVID crisis in 2020, where they're relying on McDonald's workers and Target employees to enforce the wearing of a, mask. And, in certain cases, people have, been beaten up, their arms have been broken, things like that, because, what does a Target employee know about enforcing the law? What do they really care about the, requirement? Let's think about the closure slide. I'll be referencing this throughout the screencast here, that there will be no closure. It just seems like a repeat of a lot of things. Same things just keep on happening. And let's take a look here at the Little Rock 9, which I think is a good example of the Federalist, anti-federalist debate. Notice the state troop here. He's there to make sure that things do not get out of hand. He is not there to protect the rights of the black students trying to enter the school. He's there to just make sure that there's no riot, which, if you watch the video footage, that is precisely what happens. Alex Wilson was not mentioned in the video, and the Alex Wilson case is interesting here. Let's take a look at the beating of this particular reporter.
In Clinton, Tennessee. Somewhere outside the picture was Dr. King, speaking, traveling, but seldom making news as a leader.
So that issue was not addressed in the video, but I bring that up because I'm going to make a connection to that later. This is an interesting document here. It's looking at the Brown versus Board of Ed, what's going on at Central High School, the year 1957. Notice how it says you'll be able to participate in all activities. Think about being in a school and whether or not Brown versus Board of Ed just says you can go to school, or if it says you can go to school and attend all activities and functions. There's a difference there. There's a federal requirement saying integrate the schools. However, it looks like there seems to be a loophole that has been found by some of the schools that don't want to comply with federal legislation, which is a connection to the Federalist debate. We also looked at the Greensboro, North Carolina sit-ins. Again, I want you to role play the scenario. How would you go about enforcing if you are the waiter, the waitress, maybe you're the restaurant owner? How are you going to enforce integrate or segregated seating? What would you say to these 4 patrons right here? And if you watch the video, you know that things start to get out of hand. You should also notice that black and white demonstrators are there protesting, as you saw in the video footage with Snick. So again, how does the past influence the present? I'm going to address that. How do groups respond to oppression? Should you always remain nonviolent? At what point do you start to meet violence with violence? Which brings up the interstate, which was not in the video, was not assigned, but this represents the interstate, the federal highway system, roads that are running north, south, east, and west. And the question here is whether or not this highway, which is a federal highway, but physically going through the south, do those rest areas on this particular highway system that's owned by the federal government have to comply with, integration? It's an interesting debate there, considering that the federal government did restrict segregation, went with the approach of integration, which brings up the protest by CORE. CORE's approach was to get on these buses and just go to some of these areas and try to figure out whether or not some of these rest areas were complying with federal legislation. And often these buses were firebombed, which prompted the federal government to put federal marshals on these buses. Notice that they are trying to get to Birmingham, which is going to be the focus of King's protests. And again, that was another video that you were asked to watch on Birmingham. And King is trying to hold the demonstration there because Birmingham was nicknamed Bombingham for the numerous attacks against people trying to fight segregation and trying to get integration to be the norm, which would get us to look at the difference between King and Malcolm X, which was addressed before. Can you always stay nonviolent? At what point do you start to go to some of the extremes? So in the video, it looked at King's letter from a Birmingham jail, where King is responding to the clergymen in Birmingham who do not want him to protest, the Alabama clergymen. And King is taking concern with that because he's saying, well, you don't really seem concerned about the conditions that brought about this demonstration, but you seem concerned about telling me when I should, have some sort of demonstration. And, when he talks here about freedom is never voluntarily given by the oppressor, it must be demanded by the oppressed. Just think about where you stand on that issue. King brings up the point about just and unjust laws. He defines both of them. And one of the things he says is that a segregation law is unjust because the group targeted by segregation laws did not have any say in creating those particular laws. In comparison to Malcolm X, this is from his Black Revolution speech, X was for separation, as he says right here. You separate. Black and white can never live together. And he wants to create a separate society. Now, one of the things to think about here, over the last couple of classes, we've been trying to make connections to the present day. And just think if X's approach was what we went with, you have everything is black owned, the schools are black run, the government, banks, whatever. If you were a black, person looking for work and you were denied a job, what would you not have in your mind? If you were then pulled over by a police officer, what would you not have in your mind? If you were, I don't know, applying for a bank loan, if you were, called a name on the street for X, by having everything black run, black owned, you would not have the thought in your mind that what is happening to you is a result of your race. So he was for separation. Here are some of the quotes from Malcolm X. Complete freedom. Nonviolence. Criminal teach a man not to defend himself. I'm not against using violence in self-defense. I don't call it violence when it's self-defense. I call it intelligence. So think about King. If you watch the video footage from Birmingham, we know that the fire department, the use of dogs to attack demonstrators, that was all in the video. The video may or may not have addressed the 16th Street Baptist bombing church. Again, King successfully integrates Birmingham, and before you know it, church is bombed, and these 4 people lose their lives as a result of some of the progress by King. So again, how much can you take? If black churches are being bombed, can we always stay nonviolent? At what point do we have to be realistic and think, hey, they're being violent, we have to be violent back? Which brings us up to, again, some of the current items here. I did a search for the Arbery case here, and notice how they're comparing this to a lynching. And I just wanted to point out that they do reference the Fugitive Slave Act, and they do make connections to some of the 1800 history that we looked at. Here's the father.
You just used the word lynching. You have called this a modern-day lynching. What do you mean by that?
Because it's a clear shot of lynching. Anytime you pursue a young man, you go jump in a truck with shotguns and a pistol and jump in a truck, and you go jump on the back of a truck and follow him and
whenever you read one of these cases, it's always interesting to look at the comments. You really could get a sense of where people stand, on the issue here, questioning whether it's a lynching. This individual right here is bringing up the Paul and Lydia Marino case. This one happened recently. So the anger over the, I guess, supposed perpetrator here in this particular killing, when somebody black kills somebody white, it goes unnoticed, but the reverse doesn't seem to be the same. So feel free to take a look at those comments. They're usually pretty interesting to look at. In class, we've been spending a lot of time looking at the questions about linking the past to the present. And just want to bring up some of the, again, some of these cases just to kind of link. Let's take a look at this clip here from the documentary Hip Hop and the LA Riots.
Across the street came out.
This is the Rodney King beating.
And one of them picked up his video camera.
And that's when they went to wailing on me. They trying to hit the back of my cranium, and they hit me in my face. These guys is going for the kill. And he said,
keep in mind, the person being beaten in this video footage, Rodney King, was speeding. He may or may not have stumbled into a police officer. He may or may not have been high on PCP. But the video footage was there. And think about whether or not footage would have mattered in the Emmett Till case. So I wanted to show you that. I wanted to show you this section here, 2330. Go back to the Wilson, the reporter. Here you have another reporter, just another event.
Have a chance to assess the situation you are confronted.
Photographer Bart Bartholomew suddenly found himself in the wrong place at the wrong time.
The crowd gathered around me when I was returning to my car. Without the police to focus their anger on, they focused their anger on me. 2 guys were beating me on the front, 2 guys were beating me on the back. They started jumping on.
We all die.
It was chaos. People were screaming and hollering and cussing and fussing. It was going down, man,
Trying somewhere else. Give it up. Hey, this Lebo, mother police. So what did you do? What happened?
I joined the crowd. What do you think I did? I joined the crowd. I mean, you know, I started assaulting and, you know, hooking in the jabbing like everybody else would.
Who were you assaulting?
Anybody that wasn't black.
Why?
Why? Because I felt I was upset, you know, because of what I saw. You know, that was just another black man, you know, beat at the hands of white people, so to speak. You know what I'm saying? You know, we were tired of it. We was upset about that, you know. Tired of them ass whoopings, you know. It's time to start dealing some of them ass whoopings out.
That last line, tired of the ass whippings. Think about all the footage you watched in the Eye on the Prize. Think about King and X. Let's take a look at the Latasha Harlins case.
This grainy security camera videotape graphically depicts the last few moments of 15-year-old Latasha Harlins' life.
Store owner Soon Ja-do thought 15-year-old Latasha Harlins was going to steal some orange juice.
She had the money in her hand. You could see the money in the videotape. And grabbed the backpack, and there became a physical altercation over the backpack. And as our victim turned to walk away from the scene, the suspect raised a weapon and shot the victim in the back of the head.
Soon Ja-do would get probation, and the father, and this is the point that I've been trying to have you write about in the last couple of classes.
Exactly what it is. Black people once again being unjustly treated by this on the street. Get his camera on the face. Since we don't.
So let's go back to the point that I wanted you to address in the closure. See, I don't have my introduction. Unbelievable. Link to the Federalist debate. You know, I wanted you to watch the Eye on the Prize series, how the past influences the present. I mean, if you want to look at the ending of the movie Black Klansman, I mean, that's interesting as well. Maybe that's something we'll look at next class. And there probably will be no closure as these events continue to happen. Eula Love, Trayvon Martin, Emmett Till. Is there any difference? And where do you stand on the King and X debate?